Hello, my name is Betty Thomas, and I'm a member of the Monrovia Duarte Black Alumni Association, and we're celebrating Black History Month. And the library, Monrovia Library, is telling stories about inspiring Afro-Americans in the arts. Our story today is called Fancy Party Gowns by Deborah Blumenthal. The story is about Ann Cole Lowe. Growing up in Alabama, Ann loved to watch her mother sew beautiful dresses for women to wear to fancy parties. When Ann was 16, her mother died, and Ann took over the business. A few years later, a customer from Florida sent her to design school where she experienced segregation. After graduation, she moved to New York and opened her design shop. Her most famous design was for Jackie Kennedy, her wedding dress and bridesmaid dresses. She continued designing and sewing well into her 70s. Her primary motivation was to prove that a Negro can become a major dress designer. This is an inspiring story of perseverance and hard work.
Fancy Party Gowns, the story of fashion designer Ann Cole Lowe by Deborah Blumenthal, illustrated by Laura Freeman. When she was old enough to thread a needle, Ann Cole Lowe's mama and grandma taught her how to sew. Wisps of cloth would fall from their work tables like confetti, and Ann would scoop them up and turn them into flowers as bright as roses in the garden. Ann's family came from Alabama. Her great-grandma had been a slave, so her family knew about working hard just to get by. Ann also knew that doing what you love could set your spirit soaring, so that's what she did, working near her mama in the family shop, making glorious dresses for women who went to fancy parties. But when Ann was 16, death stole away her mama. There was no one to care for her anymore, and no one to make the dresses. The Alabama governor's wife was waiting for her gowns. Ann thought about what she could do, not what she couldn't change. So she sat down and sewed the dresses herself. Then she stood up and ran the business. In 1916, Ann got a job sewing dresses for a woman in Florida. A year later, the woman sent her to design school in New York. Ann was a good student and a fast learner. But it was 1917, and Ann had to study in a separate classroom, all alone, because she was African American, and life wasn't fair. That didn't stop Ann. She kept on making extravagant gowns, and year after year, more and more women wanted to wear them. Elegant dresses, party gowns, no two alike.
I feel so happy when I'm making clothes that I could just jump up and down with joy, she said.
Finally, Ann saved enough money to open a salon of her own in Manhattan. She had big bills to pay and sometimes not enough money to pay them. That didn't stop her. When Ann saw obstacles, she thought about what she could do, not what she couldn't change. One day, Ann got a special order. A lady in Washington, D.C. was marrying a senator. 7 years later, this man, John F. Kennedy, would become President of the United States. Ann bought 50 yards of the finest ivory silk taffeta and trimmings to go with it. For months, she cut and sewed. The gown had a wide bouffant skirt with pleated bands and tiny wax flowers. Ann also made all the dresses for the wedding party. Then, just 10 days before the wedding, Ann opened the door to her workroom.
No!
she cried. A pipe had burst. Water gushed everywhere, flooding everything. 10 of the 16 gowns were destroyed. Anne thought about what she could do, not what she couldn't change. She bought more fabric and trim and hired others to help. She lost money instead of earning it. In just 8 days and 8 nights, Anne and her team remade all the dresses. But when Anne brought the gowns to the mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, where the wedding reception would take place, the butler who opened the door told her she'd have to use the back entrance that was meant for workers, and said that if she had to enter through the back door, the bride and bridesmaids wouldn't be wearing her dresses for the wedding. She entered through the front door. The day of the wedding, all the world saw the future First Lady of the United States, Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy, in her magnificent gown, and her bridesmaids dressed in blush pink silk file. Hardly anyone knew something more important: the name of the woman who had created all those gowns despite the odds. Why? Because Anne Cole Lowe was African American, and life wasn't fair. That didn't stop Anne. Famous women wore her gowns at big galas and on television.
I like to hear about it,
said Anne.
The oohs and ahs as they come into the ballroom.
Anne didn't make fine clothes to get rich or famous. She made them, she said,
to prove that a Negro can become a major dress designer.
Slowly, Anne got the recognition she deserved. In 1961, she was named official couturier to honor her for the 33 Cinderella gowns she designed for a fancy ball in Omaha, Nebraska. After so long, Anne stood up before fashion's biggest names, head held high, and they applauded her. In her later years, Anne continued to design dresses for prominent women. She struggled financially, though, and in 1960 was forced to close her salon in New York City. Anne continued her work until her retirement in 1972. She spent the last 5 years of her life living in Queens, New York. While researchers of Anne's life will find inconsistencies in her biography, what is never in dispute is the extent of her talent. Anne Cole Lowe died on February 25, 1981, at the age of 82.